Hello, I'm Nigel Thorne, I'm from Wales, and I have concerns about how a political ideology has influenced children's education in Wales. Within Wales, it is now mandatory for all publicly funded schools to teach children that they have a gender as well as a sex. The origin of this teaching lies in queer theory, an academic discipline whose proponents believe that power lies within language. And by forcing a change in the language that people use, they can change people's perceptions. A major figure in the development of this school of thought is Judith Butler, a figure who is revered by many. Queer theorists are intent on queering the sex and gender binary oppositions by creating categories between those binary oppositions and thus ultimately dissolving the binary oppositions, which they believe is oppressive. Now, it is thought that by encouraging children to see themselves as having a gendered soul rather than a sex body, that this will undermine the social expectations that accompany a given sex. Those who transgress boundaries are helping to break down binary oppositions and are celebrated. Many of those who choose to identify as a different gender do so after exposure to the online culture. Queer theory has been massively influential. A highly influential organisation that is currently providing training to teachers in Wales is Brook, Cymru, a Welsh offshoot of Brook. Brook's head of education, Dougie Boyd, asserts that children have a right to access their education.
In no other part of the curriculum do we allow parents to withdraw young people from education that is evidence-based, education that is facts-based, and education that we have proven that they have a right to access through things like the Covenant on Children's Rights from the UN. Brook supports all children having the right to access the full curriculum.
In the free resources of Brook Learn is a terminology guide, a highly political document where the influence of queer theory is evident. Brook would like to see this document in every school, college, university and workplace. The document has a definition of the gender binary, which is a mainly Western cultural idea that there are only two genders, and everyone must be either one or the other. It was only in the 20th century that the word gender was used in relation to humans at all. It was then used as a polite synonym for sex. The belief that there were only two sexes used to be uncontroversial. There are, after all, only two gametes. Stewart, the founder of Gendered Intelligence, has been hugely influenced by Judith Butler. In a talk entitled "We're Living on the Cusp of a Gender Revolution," Stewart claims that having your sex determined simply by your genitalia is absurd.
It's really important to emphasise the fact that it is only legally possible to be in this country and other countries, but not every country. It is only legally possible to be male or female. And the assigned sex is made at birth based on the visual, physical sex characteristic, which is genitalia. And that's it. Okay? So our legal sex or gender identity of being male or female is based on genitalia, and that's it. It's absurd.
Rejecting the claim made by Stonewall and others that gender identity is innate, Stewart returns to the claim made by Judith Butler that gender identity is created.
And this idea was taken by one of the greatest thinkers within gender theory, Judith Butler, who said there is no gender identity behind the expression of gender. So rather than I am already a gender that goes on to express that gender, the expression produces me as a gendered person. And in this is really, I think, interesting because we need to move away from a classification or a categorization of gender and into a space that allows for us to describe our gender expression.
In Stewart's worldview, rather than being innate, gender identity is more of an existentialist choice. Heather Brunskell-Evans comments, influenced by queer theory, in particular the work of Judith Butler, Stewart posits that the body has no intrinsic meaning. Rather, gender identity is a social phenomenon. Freedom lies in rejecting the heteronormative and gender-normative meanings attached to being female or male. A wellspring of possible gender identities then opens up for adoption by children, e.g. a genderqueer, gender fluid, agender, binary gender, etc. Stewart claims queer philosophy has brought about a new paradigm of thought about sex and gender, one tantamount to a scientific revolution, as described by the philosopher Thomas Kuhn. Applying this revolutionary knowledge to children and young people helps us to become more intelligent about gender in everyday settings and across wider society. Stewart further claims that our human rights should not be based on what is biologically determined, but should instead be based on that which we wish to become.
Our human rights should not be based upon that which is biologically determined. Our human rights should be based on the idea of pursuing that which we wish to become. It's about the freedom to act that is important in terms of gaining our human rights, gaining equality in society.
If people claim the right to be recognised as that which they wish to become, then that puts an obligation on everyone else in society to deny the evidence of their own senses, to deny the truth, and affirm a lie. This is not a human right, this is a demand. Whatever their intent, when politicians recite the mantra "trans rights are human rights," this is what the people in their audience will hear.
Amgyfellion, pnawn da, mae'r haul yn disgleirio unwaith eto ar Abertawe a diolch wrth gwrs am y cyfle I cael bod yma. Thank you so much for the chance to be here. What a fantastic day to have a day of celebration, of socialisation, but of course, as well, as you heard Rob say, of campaigning for the rights of LGBTQ plus people, not just here in Swansea, but in Wales and around the world. The modern history of the liberation struggle of LGBTQ plus people has been, on the whole, a remarkable story of success. But none of that should distract us from the fact that the struggle is never over. There are always battles to be fought. There are always those who would seek to reverse the gains that have been made. And that's why a day like today is so important, because it brings people together both to celebrate, but also as a demonstration of our determination here in Wales to be an LGBTQ-friendly nation in the full sense of that term, defending the rights of trans people alongside the rights of everybody else as well. Rights to be themselves. Trans rights are human rights, and that's the way we want to think of things here in Wales.
Queer theory is based on the premise that by forcing a change in the language that is used, people's perceptions can be changed. It has proven to have had a massive influence on public policy. As Professor of Sociology Michael Biggs writes in the Transition from Sex to Gender in English Prisons, the power of economic theories to shape our world is obvious. Queer theory, I argue, also has constitutive powers. What began as esoteric academic doctrine soon evolved to inspire activists and shape campaigns. It influenced the formulation of the Gender Recognition Act, the first law in the world to allow someone to change legal sex without undergoing any physical change. Queer theory motivated activists who in 2015 launched a social media campaign to transfer a violent male to the women's estate. This successful campaign was followed by 2 suicides in prison, which were given prominence in the mainstream media. These events persuaded the government to revise prison regulations, advised by Gendered Intelligence, an organisation founded on queer theory. The regulations of 2016 established gender identity as the criterion by which males should be allowed to enter women's prisons, albeit hedged with some qualifications. Professor E.J. Renold is an academic from Cardiff University. She's a great enthusiast of Judith Butler and has written of her goal to queer childhood by the queering of the sex and gender binary oppositions. That is, by multiplying the categories between those binary oppositions and thus dissolving those binary oppositions. She puts great store on promoting children's rights and works closely with Brook. In the primary agenda resource she created, she states that children have a right to a gender identity. In her agenda resource for secondary school pupils, she encourages children to question their gender. And Professor Renold claims that removing the parental opt-out ensures that children have a right to RSE.
Children's rights to RSE is also now protected by ending the parental right to withdraw. So parents no longer be able to withdraw their children from RSE, which means that all children will now have the right to participate in this new, holistic, developmentally appropriate RSE.
Later in his talk, J. Stewart describes the importance of agency in allowing people to choose their gender.
This is about agency. This is about being able to make choices and express ourselves. And also, when it feels kind of wrong, when we get that sense that something is not allowed, but we would like to express it in a certain way, we need to perceive those moments as political, and we need to challenge them. We need to, each of us, become more intelligent about gender. Thinking, reading, reflecting, discussing, having chats in the pub over breakfast. We need to be critical by the things that we see around us, and we need to challenge one another. We need to challenge the teachers in our classrooms, our co-workers, and our peers.
Lynn Neagle, the Minister responsible for health in the Welsh Government, emphasised the importance of empowering children and giving them agency at an online RSE conference for practitioners organised by Professor Renold.
I believe RSE is a child's right, which is why I'm so pleased that the Senedd enshrined that right in law through the Curriculum and Assessment Wales Bill that we passed shortly before the Senedd elections. Empowering children and giving them agency in their lives is crucial for their well-being. RSE really is children's rights in action.
Children's rights are also mentioned in the recommendations document of the LGBTQ+ expert panel, a highly influential government-appointed advisory group. It states, the Welsh Government to provide statutory national trans guidance for schools and local authorities. There is a need for a trusted national information resource which provides schools with practical information and tools for supporting trans young people. Every child has the right to access these valuable resources and to be educated in an environment that inexplicably should be explicitly supports their rights. Such a resource should provide guidance on how to allow trans students to participate fully in school life as exemplified in the guidance produced in 2015 by Wrexham County Borough Council. The design of these resources should be developed in conjunction with organisations with expertise in this area, such as Umbrella Cymru, Viva LGBTQ and Gendered Intelligence, and build upon inclusive co-produced resources such as the Agenda resource. Such an approach would show in action attempts to take a children's rights and equalities-based approach to learning as specified in the Children's Commissioner for Wales's guide on the subject and as specified in the draft Children's Rights Scheme put forward by the Welsh Government with reference to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. On 22nd of April 2023, an article on the BBC website reported that the Welsh Government would be publishing national guidance during the next academic year. The article focused on the charity School of Hard Knocks, which offers training to schools via the INK project. The INK project contains the usual ideological language. The INK project contains a Be an Ally section with details about how pupils can shame fellow pupils who speak the truth. Brook Cymru will also be advising the Welsh Government. So despite the concerns raised in the Cass review about the dangers of social transition, the Welsh Government will be advised by groups that support the change of pronouns and change of names and the policing of those who may wish to question it. This follows the Stonewall direction that questioning is to be regarded as transphobia. The organisation Sex Matters argues that the social transitioning of a child is incompatible with child safeguarding. Supporting full social transitioning in schools is incompatible with child safeguarding and the duty of care that schools have for all their pupils. Schools are not clinics, and teachers are not mental health professionals. It is not appropriate for them to be overseeing a psychosocial intervention with such potentially grave consequences. How do we get to such a place where there has been, 1, a normalisation of a mental health condition, 2, the claim is made that being recognised as a gender that is different to your sex body is a human right, 3, the pushing of a political agenda is framed as a child's right? Well, the answer to those questions can be found in a document produced by Dentons, the world's biggest law firm. Dentons have worked closely with Stonewall. In an article for The Spectator, James Kirkup writes, "The document is the work of Dentons, which says it is the world's largest law firm. The Thomson Reuters Foundation and the International Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Queer and Intersex Youth and Student Organisation, IGLYO. Both Dentons and the Thomson Reuters Foundation note that the document does not necessarily reflect their views. The report is called Only Adults? Good Practices in Legal Gender Recognition for Youth. Its purpose is to help trans groups in several countries bring about changes in the law to allow children to legally change their gender without adult approval and without needing the approval of any authorities. We hope this report will be a powerful tool for activists and non-governmental organisations working to advance the rights of trans youth across Europe and beyond," says the foreword. In the words of the report, it is recognised that the requirement for parental consent or the consent of a legal guardian can be restrictive and problematic for minors. One would think that the job of parents is to restrict the choices of minors because, by definition, they are not competent to make adult decisions. This is not the stance of the report. Indeed, it suggests that states should take action against parents who are obstructing the free development of a young trans person's identity in refusing to give parental authorization when required. In short, this is a handbook for lobbying groups that want to remove parental consent over significant aspects of children's lives. A handbook written by an international law firm and backed by one of the world's biggest charitable foundations. And how do the authors suggest that legal change be accomplished? Well, it states, while cultural and political factors play a key role in the approach to be taken, there are certain techniques that emerge as being effective in progressing trans rights in the good practice countries. Among those techniques, get ahead of the government agenda. Well, what does that mean? In many of the NGO advocacy campaigns that we studied, there were clear benefits where NGOs managed to get ahead of the government and publish progressive legislative proposal before the government had time to develop their own. NGOs need to intervene early in the legislative process, and ideally before it has even started. This will give them far greater ability to shape the government agenda and the ultimate proposal than if they intervene after the government has already started to develop its own proposals. Another technique that has been used to great effect is the limitation of press coverage and exposure. Another tip from the document: tie your campaign to more popular reform. For example, in Ireland, Denmark and Norway, changes to the law on legal gender recognition were put through at the same time as other more popular reforms, such as marriage equality legislation. This provided a veil of protection, particularly in Ireland, where marriage equality was strongly supported, but gender identity remained a more difficult issue to win public support for. The document goes on, based on our research, human rights arguments have been instrumental to the success of several campaigns for more progressive gender recognition laws. James Kirkup, writing for The Spectator, ends his article on the document with the following observation. I'm not going to tell you what I think of the report or the agenda it sets out. I'm not going to pass comment on it or its authors. I'm just going to try to summarise its nature and contents. A major international law firm has helped write a lobbying manual for people who want to change the law to prevent parents having the final say about significant changes in the status of their own children. That manual advises those lobbying for that change to hide their plans behind a veil and to make sure that neither the media nor the wider public know much about the changes affecting children that they are seeking to make. Because if the public find out about those changes, they might well object to them. The contribution of many organisations was acknowledged in the Denton's document. The only organisation that wished to remain anonymous was from the UK. Anna Robinson was co-chair of IGLYO when they commissioned the Denton's document. She left before the document was published to work as research coordinator for the all-party parliamentary group on LGBT rights in Parliament. Her position initially was partly funded by Stonewall. In the financial year ending 31st of March 2022, Stonewall received £426,000 from government sources. The biggest contributor was the Welsh government. Those concerned about the influence of queer theory on Stonewall, the influence of Stonewall on the Welsh government, the suppression of free speech, and the removal of the parental right to withdraw their child from relationships and sexuality education, may wish to support Public Child Protection Wales. Links are included below.